Welcome. My name's Larry Jordan, and now you've seen my face for about as long as the entire presentation will occur, because I got a bunch of slides I want to talk to you about. Let's hit this button, see what happens. Click here, and click here, and we should be all set. I'm waiting for a signal from Zoe, but Zoe has not. There we go. Now we are set. Welcome. This presentation on how to improve your presentation skills. Let's just click here and make this happen. There we go. When you're handed the ability to, or the opportunity to do a presentation, two things happen. First, your entire body washes over with fear, and second, you try to figure out, how am I going to be successful at doing this presentation? Well, that's what I want to talk about. It isn't as bad as you think. We're going to give you a whole lot of tips today that you can use to improve your own presentation skills. And it starts with probably understanding that you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be you. I can't begin to tell you how many people have come up to me saying, I hate speaking in front of groups of people. And the real reason that they hate speaking in front of groups of people is they feel that they have to meet some arbitrarily high standard, and you don't. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be you. Don't set unrealistic expectations. People aren't expecting a movie star. They already know who you are. They just are expecting you to show up. So let's start this part of the presentation by taking a more specific look at how we can improve our speaking skills. And the absolute number one driving factor behind all of us, even people that do this a lot, even actors, is we're always fighting fear. Fear is the number one thing that holds us back. What if we fail? What if people don't listen to what we have to say? What if people laugh at us? When I presented this conversation a little bit ago, a bunch of folks asked questions. What if I hate my voice? What if I'm too nervous? What if I have a memory lapse? What if I'm too serious? What if I'm intimidated by the people in the audience? Well, I want to tackle these because they're all coming to the same place, which is, what if I'm not good enough? But let's look at this. I've done videos and worked with professional actors for more years than I care to count. And I have never met anybody on camera that likes the sound of their voice. No radio announcer, no disc jockey, no actor, no one likes the sound of their voice as it's recorded. Now, they may like the sound of their voice talking because they're egocentric that way, but they don't like the sound. And the reason is, when you hear your voice, this is true for all of us, when you hear your voice, the low frequency sounds are transmitted not only through the air, but through the bones in our body. And those bones carry those really low frequencies up into your ears, and your ears perceive that as a really rich, deep sound to your voice that only exists inside your own head. Even if you had the world's best microphone and the world's highest quality audio recorder, it would not hear that sound carried through bone conduction. So nobody likes the sound of their voice because only we have that bone conduction of our voice. The voice that a microphone records is the voice that everybody else hears, everybody but you. And yet somehow you still have friends. Somehow people still talk to you. Somehow people want to hear what you have to say. It's just your voice sounds the way they expect it, not the way you expect it. Well, I will confess that my very first job was in radio, and I was a disc jockey in Rockton, Illinois, which is about the size of a postage stamp northwest of Chicago. I was broadcasting most to cows and sheep and doing a great job of presenting beautiful music in those days. Lasted for 3 months. And the program director called me in and said, Larry, you are a second tenor, and what we need is a baritone. Enjoy the rest of your life. And that quickly, my radio career was over. I really had my heart set on being a disc jockey. In those days, disc jockeys had a cool life. But it was not to be. And that was because my voice was pitched too high. So therefore, I could not get a job in radio. I was not a baritone, though for decades after, I worked every morning at pitching my voice 3 notes lower. So if radio was ever going to call, I'd be ready. But then I realized that my voice is whatever it is. I got to make the best of the instrument that I've got. And after, 30 or 40 years of stewing over being a second tenor, I finally accepted maybe a second tenor is okay and move on to the next point, which is I'm too nervous. Again, getting back to my experience in the film industry, everybody I've talked to that's on camera gets nervous. Nervous is good. Nervous means you care. Nervous means you want to do a good job. Nervous is an indicator that you're going to do a good presentation. Because if you're not nervous, if you're just laid back, okay, it's another time, I'm going to just get up here, I'm going to talk, there's going to be no energy, you're going to be flat, the audience is going to be bored, and nobody is going to be interested in what you have to say because you're not even interested in what you're talking about. If you're not enthusiastic, the audience is not going to be interested. Nervous is an indicator that you care, that you want to do a good job. And I use nervousness as a driver of energy to keep the presentation moving forward. Being nervous is a good thing, not a bad thing. The older I get, the more I worry that my memory is completely shot. I can't remember breakfast, and it wasn't that long ago. Maybe dementia's setting in. Maybe. But nobody expects you to be perfect. If I say something and I get the words wrong, I just say, that was wrong. You'll probably hear it a couple times during this presentation where I know where I'm going, but the mouth may not move in the right direction. Back up. Not a Hollywood film. You're not expected to be perfect. You're not repeating dialogue you're supposed to memorize. You're conveying a concept that you care about, that you want other people to care about, and you want them to take action. And that requires enthusiasm, and sometimes the mouth just doesn't move as fast as your brain is. Don't worry about it. Back up a sentence and try it again. What if you're too serious? Well, it's just the same thing as if you're too funny. Be who you are. If you're normally serious, be serious. If you're normally a jokester, be a jokester. People are expecting you to show up, not somebody pretending to be you, just the real, truthful, legitimate, honest to goodness you. And if you're intimidated, there's only one person that knows the subject as well as you do, and that's you. Now, there are other people that maybe know something about the subject. That's why they're there. But if they felt they knew it just as well as you did, they wouldn't show up. If it's senior management, they want to hear whether your idea is going to make the company money or not. If it's coworkers, they want to hear what you've learned that they don't know yet. Intimidation is you giving up your right to know what you know, but you know it. So stop being afraid. Stop being held back. Use the fear as a positive force to drive your energy, to sharpen your skills, to make sure your research is accurate. Let that fear drive you to do a better presentation and not hold you back from doing any presentations at all. So ways we can control our fear is to remember that our number one goal is to be ourselves, not pretend to be someone we're not. People don't expect you to be perfect. Enthusiasm compensates for a lot. And believe me, if you get excited, other people get excited. And if you can't be bothered to get excited, they're not even going to wake up. Focus on being enthusiastic. Share why we should be excited and don't rush. Don't rush. Keep your goal foremost in mind. We'll be talking more about that in the next couple of minutes, and practice. Give yourself a chance to rehearse. Never, ever, ever say, I know what this is in my head. Actually say your presentation out loud. Practice the words. Find out whether that slide can be pronounced properly, or is it just too much of a tongue twister that you just end up getting all tripped up by. But probably the most important advice is don't rush. When we get nervous, we talk faster. I mean, we talk really faster. We talk so fast that the words just sort of trip over. Wait a minute. Take a deep breath. Slow down. You've had a chance to rehearse this whole presentation. The audience only gets to hear it once. It's not that they're lost. They're not that they hate you. It's just that the words are coming so quickly they can't keep up. Slow down. Help them understand what you're talking about. Take a breath every so often. Your audience will appreciate it. You don't need to bludgeon them with constant flow of words. Give them a chance to think. So now that we've had a chance to realize that fear is a natural part of any presentation, and as a natural part, we can deal with it. We understand that our real goal is to be ourselves, and that we want to be able to have a presentation that people can understand. We got to think about how we want to plan it. Now, this really revolves around your area of how, the way that you plan, the way that your mind works. But tell you one that works for me. Remember that you and your ideas are the star of the presentation. I have not gone to a single presentation once in my entire life where I say, I have to see what this guy's slides look like. Slides have never motivated me to attend a presentation. But the person speaking and what they're speaking about motivates me all the time. You and your ideas are the star of the presentation, which means that we don't need to put all of our ideas on our slides. The slides are to support us. They're not our script. They're not a handout. They're not a data sheet. They're support. They're there to give people something to look at when they get tired of looking at you. They're there to attract attention. They're there to help communicate your point. But they don't replace you. They enhance you. So as we're planning our presentation, remember that people come to see us, not to see our slides. But more importantly, we have to ask ourselves, not what do I need, but what does the audience need? Why are they coming to hear me? What's their motivating factor? Clearly, as part of our presentation, we need to be truthful. And it's not just because lying is a bad thing, but when people are trying to make a decision on whether to follow somebody's opinion or not, trust is the absolute number one driving factor. Can I trust this presentation? Can I trust the presenter? Can I trust what they're saying? And if you're truthful, that trust is easier to build. If you prevaricate, which is a word that I try to work into all of my presentations, if you are a persistent prevaricator, you're not going to be as successful as if you try to share people the honest you and your truth as you see it. I was doing this presentation to an engineering group a couple months ago, and they said, we love facts. Give us data sheets. All right, I'll give you a handout with 700 tables filled with numbers and all the facts you need. But I don't need to put those facts on the screen. My slides are to reinforce me and to help me tell the story that's going to convince you as to the rightness of my ideas. But it all comes down to being yourself and being comfortable with who you are. I'm not saying you're perfect. You're not. I'm not. But we can be ourselves. When we build a presentation, there's really three sides to it. There's the message, there's the visual story, and there's the delivery. Yesterday, I gave a presentation here at the Creativity Conference on the techniques of visual persuasion. This was the concepts and techniques to improve your presentations by using visuals more effectively. This was the design, the visual story part. What we're talking about today in this presentation is we're looking at the message and the delivery. We've looked at the delivery by getting away out of our own way, by being ourselves, being enthusiastic, focusing on what the audience needs. Now we need to really think about the message. So, by the way, this presentation from yesterday is one of the free session videos that you can get in the Creativity Conference. When you go to the session listing, there's a link that takes you right to that movie, and you're able to watch it. It was brilliant. So Zoe did not fall asleep. I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful gift on her part. But I think you would enjoy it, and it's going to sort of dovetail well with what we're talking about today. First thing you want to do when you're given a presentation, it's time to start planning, is get off the computer. My first reaction is sit down, fire up an outlining program, and start outlining, start typing, start writing something. But that becomes, I think, too limiting. A better thing is to get off the computer so you're not forced to enter data. Grab a bunch of sticky notes or just some white paper and a magic marker and brainstorm. What do you want to convey? What's important? What do you want people to do? What are they worried about? Why would someone attend your presentation? The more that you start to think outside the box and do that without being inside PowerPoint or being inside Keynote or being inside Word and trying to type some sort of literal outline, forces your brain into making a decision immediately, and then you're locked into that channel and can't think outside it. What can you do to brainstorm first? Now, there's software out there called mind mapping, which is designed exactly for that. And some people like mind mapping software. I have never been able to figure out how to use it. It's just too complex for me. I'll take a sheet of paper and draw lines and squiggly arrows all over because it helps me to think about what I want to cover and sort of the relationships between stuff. Now, I will never pass a test as an artist, but that sheet of paper is just for me. And then from that, I'll start to figure out how to get it organized and how to have it make sense. But the first is give yourself a chance to take a deep breath, brainstorm, and think outside the box. Then, before you get carried away with the presentation itself, we need to clearly define the core message. What is the one thing or two things that you want your audience to understand? Clearly, one of them for me so far in this presentation is that fear is natural. Fear is good. Don't let the fear govern you. Use the fear for your own ends. That's clearly one of the messages that I want to convey. There's a couple of others. We'll get to those. But don't let your life be driven by fear. The second, when we're defining this message, nope, wrong button. When we're defining this message, simple and clear are better than pedantic and ostentatious. Yes, it's nice to prove that you went to graduate school and you can read a dictionary. But your goal in this presentation is not to impress people. Your goal is to communicate. How can you share an idea? And if the people in the audience have to have a dictionary nearby to look up the words you're using, they're going to have a hard time following your presentation. There's no harm in taking a complex idea and making it simpler by using simple words to describe it. It's still a complex idea. But you don't need to get carried away unless the audience is just as literate as you are. I'm thinking a medical lecture, for instance, where there are specific medical terms that need to be used to describe a particular condition. But if I'm a doctor talking to general consumers about some new medical discovery, I can't use the same term that I would use if I was talking to doctors. Clarity and simplicity are really good things to practice whenever you do a presentation, because it makes it easier for your audience to grasp what you're talking about. Once we've got a sense of what our message is, that's the core thing we want people to understand, the elevator pitch in marketing speech. The next thing we have to define is the audience. Who are they? What do they want? First, there's the audience in terms of, am I talking to grade school kids, or am I talking to high school kids? Am I talking to college folks, business people? Am I talking to people who know what I know, video professionals, or people that only recognize television because they watch it? Who's my audience? And the reason this is important is the way you talk to them and the language you use and the illustrations you create totally changes if I'm talking to elementary children versus college kids. If I'm talking to video professionals versus consumers, the stories I tell, the language I use, the way I describe a situation is totally different. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just that the audience drives the presentation. The other key concept that you need to understand with the audience was first developed by Dale Carnegie back in 1936. Dale was one of the first and probably the most famous self-help authors that ever wrote a book. His book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, has been republished in so many languages and so many hundreds of millions of copies. I think it's just about everywhere. And he coined the term WIIFM. The reason that you're listening to me right now is not because you like hearing me speak, though it'd be nice to think that. The reason you're listening to me right now is because you want to know what's in it for me. WIIFM. What do I get out of listening to Larry's presentation on improving my speaking skills? How do I benefit? What's in it for me? Every single person that you talk to is listening to your presentation, thinking about, how can I use this? How can I put it to work? How can I gain from this? And as soon as you start to shift your focus from what you need into what your audience needs, it makes a huge difference in how you present your ideas. Now, this is also one of the key tricks of a huckster is to say, I don't get any benefit out of this. It's all on you. Clearly, there's a two-way play of street. That's where that trust comes in, being truthful and being trustworthy, so people will accept your idea. But they're always wondering, what's in it for me? WIIFM. So as you're thinking about your audience, think about what they need. Think about what they want to get out of your presentation. Then clearly define your goal. I'm doing this 45-minute presentation today. Clearly, I have a goal. Actually, I have two goals. I'll get to those when we're done. But those goals are always in my mind. With every slide that comes up, I know exactly where I'm going. I know where I want to take you. I know how we're going to get there. I may not know every word, but I've got a clear direction in mind. I had that direction in mind as I was outlining my presentation, as I was creating the slides, as I was deciding the slide order. That was all designed to take us all to a single goal at the end. And as long as you don't lose sight of your goal, you can derail in the middle. You can get confused and trip over your own feet. But as long as you know where you're going, you can take a deep breath. You can say, let's get back on track. Let's define the goal. And we implement that goal with what's called the call to action. This is a specific, explicit action that you want the audience to take after presenting your story. It is not enough to show a picture of a bag of dog food. With today's market, with how overwhelmed we are with advertising and all the distractions and pressures in today's life, you need to not only show the picture of the dog food, you need to tell them that you want them to go out and buy the dog food, and this is the store where they can buy it. You need to tell them exactly what you want them to do, what you need them to do, and where they need to go to do it. An explicit action called the call to action. Every presentation needs to end with this so that you wrap it all up in a nice bow and you say, if you agree with me, this is where you need to go and this is what you need to do. It's like asking for the check. Time to pay. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make the presentation memorable. Absolutely. Use slides to create ideas. Don't use a slide. We've all seen death by PowerPoint where there's 750,000 words on a slide, and no pictures, and nothing makes any sense. And there's 17 lines and arrows going in all directions. Oh, just shoot me now. Get me out of the room. Use the slides to create ideas. Use your slides to tell a story. Use your slides to dramatize what you're talking about. Don't use your slides as a script. Use them as support. Remember, our goal when we're doing a persuasive presentation is first we've got to grab somebody's attention. Nothing grabs attention like pictures. And pictures tell stories, as we see with this couple here. Recreation of a stage play. They clearly do not hate each other. They clearly are lost in their own personal moment. And I would tell you the story of how that got to be created, but I've only got 45 minutes, so I'll have to come back to that a little later. Use your slides to attract attention. Create and illustrate ideas. Tell stories. Be dramatic. There's no harm in hooking the attention of an audience and then paying it off with a story. Then we want to write like a poet. Now, this sounds kind of weird, but in a presentation, especially on presentation slides, we've only got a few slides we can put on the screen. There's what, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. There's 18 words here on the slide. That's far less than any poster. It's less than a 30-second television commercial. But again, we're not using the slides as a script. We're using the slides as a reinforcement to what we're talking about. So I had a wonderful conversation with a poet this morning, Joel McClellan, who's a performance poet. And if you think about what poetry is using the absolute minimum number of words to convey the absolute maximum amount of emotion. The idea of, well, for instance, haiku. Haiku is 17 syllables, 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second, 5 syllables in the third. And think about how you can use the fewest number of words to evoke the greatest amount of emotion, to evoke ideas, to expand the thinking of your audience. Use active words. Avoid things like be and have and has. Write short. Ernest Hemingway was challenged once to write a short story in less than 10 words. Short story had to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. He thought for a second, because nobody thought you could write a short story in less than 10 words. He said, I can do it in 6. He said, the story is for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Oh my goodness, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. First time I heard that, which is a long time ago, it just stopped me in my tracks. How much emotion is packed into those 6 words? Just imagine the whole environment around you, excitedly anticipating the arrival of somebody new, and it doesn't work out the way you plan. You don't need to write a book to touch the hearts of your audience. Another thing is to use rhythm. Think of the phrases that we like: faith, hope, and charity, beginning, middle, and end, of the people, by the people, for the people. 3, 2, 1, go. How that rhythm reinforces your story. Now, clearly the rhythm needs to be accurate, that is to say, relevant, and be conversational. Don't write like a college textbook. Speak the way you normally speak. Again, slow down. Give people a chance to understand you. Don't be pretentious. It takes them too long to understand the words. Use rhythm, but the heart of it is to make your words work. So when you're presenting, when your slides come up, when you're doing the presentation, people aren't lost. They're keeping up with you. Let every word carry its full weight. Now, there's words that we can leverage within our presentation, especially when we're putting it on the screen, at least some of them. One of the most powerful words there is the name of the person you're talking to, your audience member's name. I've mentioned Zoe a couple times because I've had the pleasure of working with her both today and yesterday. And it's much nicer for me to look at her and say, Zoe, I've got a question, and say, hey, you. If I use her first name, she's automatically tuned in. And she wants to make sure that whatever my question is gets answered accurately. And it's much more personal to use their name than to say you guys or you. And isn't it nice that we're all here together? If instead I say, Terry, it's wonderful that you're here, or Michael, I appreciate your time, or John, it's good to see you again, that acknowledgement is important. It's important to me to acknowledge that you're there, and it's important to you to know that I know you're there. Another powerful word is free. We had a conversation yesterday. I was using this as an example. And I said, wouldn't it be better to say included at no cost? And the answer is no. Free is 4 letters, and I can make it the size of a small truck. Included at no cost feels like it needs to be as an asterisk as part of the legal language of the limitations of the offer that you're making. Free is a statement. Included at no cost is an apology. Another important word that we don't use enough is because. If part of our presentation is set up the problem, one of the problems that many people have with doing presentations is that they're afraid. Because they're afraid they're not good enough, or that people might laugh. That because is important. I can say, here's the problem, but if I don't follow it up with answering the reason this is a problem is because, and then explain what the because is, it just seems, the presentation just seems superficial. So a really good thing is a if, then, because kind of construct. Another good word to use is instantly. I mean, goodness knows, with the way we order stuff online today, we want it delivered yesterday. Amazon is working on drones to be able to get us stuff within 2 hours after we order it. We would prefer that it show up the day before we think about we need it. Golly, we're driven by instant today. Very powerful word. Another powerful word is new. Now, there are implementations of new, but I like the simple use of the word new. I'm not a big fan of industry leading. Yes, this changes everything is another phrase I don't like. But new hasn't worn out its welcome. This is a new idea. This is a new product. This is something new you can try. I want to avoid words like be and have been, was, and for goodness sake, avoid cliches like the plague. These are dead words. They just take up space, and they prevent people from understanding how wonderful your idea actually is. When it comes to writing, we want to write less and use images more, especially when it comes to our slides. We want the slide to be clean. We want the slide to have an image on it that's relevant to what we're talking about. We want to make sure that people never lose their focus on us, but the slide's there in case you need something to look at. When it comes time to deliver the presentation, we've already talked about the fact that, yes, you're going to be nervous, and that's okay. We've talked about the fact that you're going to want to rush as fast as you can because you're embarrassed about standing in front of a group of people. Just slow down. But I think the most important piece of advice is this. Presentations are always a one-on-one conversation, even when you're talking to a group. I know exactly how many people are online right now and watching us on this conversation. But whether it's one person or 5 people or 50 or 5,000, my presentation's really just to you. It's you and me together talking about this. There may be other people listening in, and from my perspective, I'm aware of the audience. But from your perspective, it's just you. Watching your computer, watching me, asking yourself, does Larry have anything interesting that I can learn from? Does Larry have an idea that I can put to my own use? Is it time to go to lunch? One of the things that makes an actor good on stage, or a musician good on stage, even if there's 70,000 people in the audience, if every person in that audience feels they have a one-on-one connection with the person on stage. That's what makes a Zoom meeting interesting, because it's just you and me. It's a one-on-one conversation. And this affects the language that I use. I use you and me and us and we a lot. I use inclusive languages, thinking about how we can solve a problem together, thinking about how we can learn more about this problem. It's as though I was sitting across the table from you in a coffee shop having a conversation, though I will grant you with more energy than I would use in a coffee shop. I'd probably be quieter so I don't disturb other people. But I never, ever lose sight of the fact that even in a group, we're always listening through our eyes, listening through our ears, and watching through our eyes. It's a one-on-one conversation, even if I'm sitting with a group of people. And the more you position it as a one-on-one conversation, at least in your imagination, you avoid using derogatory terms like all of us. I don't care about all of us. I just care about me. What's in it for me? How do I benefit out of this? Presentations are always a one-on-one conversation. You want to create a flow. I saw this photograph of a lion and I liked it. Just thinking quietly, watching what's going on. It's hard to start stronger than a lion, so it struck me as a good start. Start strong. Grab attention right from the beginning. You want to lead with one of your biggest bullet points right at the top. Get people hooked immediately. Grab attention right from the beginning. Then in the middle, tell stories that illustrate your points that you're trying to make. And then finally end strong. Build to an emotional high that leads into the call to action. This is the big finish. This is the wrap up. No, I'm not saying you need to get on the table and dance, especially if it's me dancing. That would not be a good thing. But this is not your time to be shy. This is a subject you care about. This is a subject you want other people to care about. You need to build into a nice emotional high that leads directly into the call to action. If you believe this is important, this is what you need to do. This is where you need to go to do it, and I want you to do it right now. Because if you don't care, nobody else will. Several things that you can do to really screw up the start of your presentation. Number one, never apologize. If this is the first speech you've given in your life, don't tell anybody. Don't say, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. Don't say, gosh, I feel embarrassed up here. Don't say, I'm feeling nervous. Don't say, just start. Also, unless you're really good telling jokes, don't ever start with a joke. I don't care what Toastmasters says. I don't care what it's been written about since the beginning of time. Very few people can tell a joke. Very few. And you and I are not among them. What is the phrase? Dying is easy. Comedy is hard. If you're not a comedian, you're leading with a weakness by starting with a joke. You're leading with a weakness by apologizing. Just start with enthusiasm and then enjoy yourself. You've got the undivided attention of everybody in the audience for a very short period of time. That's a special treat, and it deserves to be savored. And then slow down. Give your audience time to keep up. There's a golden rule of teaching which I try to follow. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. This is where we're going to go. We're going to talk about presentation skills. We're going to talk about writing. We're going to talk about messaging. We're going to talk about delivery. Then we talk about messaging and overcoming fear and delivery. And then I'll wrap up in just a minute and tell you the stuff that we've covered for the last 45 minutes. Keep an eye on your audience. Make sure they're tuned in. What do their reactions tell you? If 5 people have fallen off their seats and they're drooling quietly on the carpet, perhaps your enthusiasm level's a little low. So keep your enthusiasm high. Work to build their trust. Remember, they're not going to change their opinion unless they can trust you, unless they feel that your argument is believable and that you're somebody that they should pay attention to. Always keep your goal in mind. Where are you taking them? Where are we headed? Knowing how to react to an audience always takes practice. It's especially hard when you're doing a presentation where you can't see people's faces. But when do they tune out? What do you need to do to get them to tune in? Are they restless? Are they talking to the neighbor? Are they taking notes? What are they doing? Sometimes that's easy to tell. Sometimes it's harder to tell. But paying attention to the audience is going to give you the feedback that you need to decide whether you're reaching them or falling short. Finally, a few final thoughts. And the first is Murphy's Law still rules. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and at the worst possible moment, so plan on it. I've had presentations where the projector died. I've had presentations where we had an entire power failure and the auditorium went to emergency lights. That was exciting. I've had presentations where an assistant loaded the wrong slide deck. I mean, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And at the worst possible moment, there's nothing wrong with walking up with a sheet of paper, which is your slides in your hand. There's nothing wrong with having a backup plan. There's nothing wrong with rehearsing your backup plan. But Murphy is still there and lurking in the background to humiliate you at the worst possible time. And if something goes wrong, just say, hey, it went wrong. It was a great idea. It worked in rehearsal. I've done so many demos where I click on it and it worked perfectly in rehearsal. And suddenly now the software refuses to work. It's embarrassing if I was trying to be perfect. It's merely funny if I'm trying to do the best I can. So don't be perfect. Just be yourself. A good way to rehearse is to use what's called a Pecha-Kucha technique. That's P-E-T-C-H-A. There's a typo there, Pecha-Kucha. If you do a web search for it, this is a special way of presenting slides. It's 20 slides. And you have to present each slide for 20 seconds. So in 7 minutes and 20 seconds, your presentation is done. The slides change automatically. There's a whole cottage industry of contests with people doing Pecha-Kucha talks. Slides are basically images only, very little text. It's a great way to make sure that you're focused, that your slides are working. It's a great way to rehearse so that you're not wasting time stuttering over the same thing over and over again. Do a web search, Pecha-Kucha, and learn how you can use that technique to practice on your own. So here's the key points. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be you, and nervousness is okay. You want to be enthusiastic. Stay focused on your goal. Where are we headed? Make sure you all come to the same place at the same time, but enjoy the trip. And you're having a one-on-one conversation with each member of the audience. Keep it personal. Keep it focused. Don't speak to the crowd. Speak to the individuals in the crowd. Now, my call to action is this book. I wrote it about 18 months ago. It's called The Techniques of Visual Persuasion. If this talk today has caught your interest, I recommend this book. There's nothing like it. I say that even though I wrote it. And the reason is it's a survey book that talks about persuasion and PowerPoint slides and presentations and photography and editing images in Photoshop and video production, video editing, motion graphics, interview techniques. It's all a survey. It's never going to turn you into a filmmaker or a professional photographer, but it will give you an understanding of all the different elements that we have in visual communications to persuade people to our points of view. Everything you need, all in one place. And if you go to this web address, peachpit.com visual persuasion, and enter the code visual persuasion, you can save 35%. The reason I care about this is I've suffered through way too many presentations where the speaker is nervous, where the speaker is not focused. They're too busy trying to be perfect, to be themselves. And it's uncomfortable for both of us. We can do better. And today's talk was designed to explain how. We've got some time before I get booted off. Questions? Let's see. Ivan asks, by the way, you can see the questions along with me if you open up the chat. Ivan asks, would one tailor the slide deck content differently for in-person versus online presentations? Probably not. I didn't do anything different in these slides. If I was doing this is done doing Keynote because I'm a big fan of Keynote. If I was online or if I was in an auditorium, I'd use the same slides. I would change the way I present. I would change the way that I move. I've done enough on-stage presentations to change my blocking. Here, I'm limited to a close-up on the camera. I can't get up and pace back and forth. I can't use a whiteboard easily. So my on-screen activities would be different if it's live versus online, but not the slides. Brian asks, regarding one-on-one conversational style presentations, how can we listen better while we present? What kind of mindset can we adopt? Don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry. Let's see. I got to do one more. No, don't be in a hurry. No, I do want to do this. Hang on a second. Get out of this, hit this, find Zoom. Here's Zoom. There we go. And go to this view. Now I can see, when I'm doing a slide presentation, I can't see your faces. Now I can see your faces, and I can see who's paying attention and who isn't. Who's busy taking notes and who's fallen asleep, who's got their camera on and who doesn't. So how do we listen better? I watch the audience. Normally in a classroom environment when I'm teaching, I'll be asking, are there questions as we go along? I didn't have enough time to do that until the end because I knew how much time it was going to take to present my material. But I will leave you with one thing, and I'll just say it now and I'll wrap up with it, is that if you have questions, send me an email at larry@larryjordan.com. I get dozens of emails a day and I answer all of them. If you've got a question about this presentation, drop me a note. If you disagree with the presentation, send me the disagreement. I can learn from you as well as you can learn from me. Always happy to have a conversation about ways that we can do things better. That's how I learn as well as how you learn and the rest of us learn. Brian, Michael asks, Michael's causing troubles. What happens? Michael, where'd you go? That's what happens when you heard yesterday's presentation. You get to heckle the presenter. Ivan asks, where do you stand on providing digital hard copies of the presentation before, during, or after the presentation? If you're doing a presentation which is data intensive and you need to be able to talk about the data, I would provide the handout before the presentation starts. If all you're doing is giving copies of your slides and your slides have as much text on them as mine do, I do that after the presentation. I would never do something during the presentation unless I've done enough presentations and I'm comfortable enough with my presentation skills that something in the audience is not going to upstage me. I know how to get the attention back to the stage, but that just comes with years of practice. Don't ever do something in the middle of your presentation because it's all too often going to take the attention away from you. Somebody waving around or acting silly in the audience and suddenly nobody's paying attention to you. Never set yourself up to fail like that. So if it's data the audience needs to understand what you're talking about, pass that out ahead of time and make it a handout. Don't make it a copy of your slides. Make it a handout with all the deep dive data that people need. Then at the end of your presentation, say, if you want a copy of my slides, I'll email them to you as a PDF, or you can get them as a handout. That I would do afterward. Other questions? Oh, I've got 4 minutes left before Zoe throws. I got 2 minutes left. How many minutes left, Zoe? Hold up fingers. All kinds of time. Other questions? The thing that I get so excited about with this is doing a presentation isn't hard. It's just getting out of your own way. We let the fear, the fact, oh, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I must be a terrible presenter. No, it means you're going to do a good job. I always like knowing people are nervous before they go on stage, or I like knowing people are nervous before they go on camera. My job as host if they're a guest, is to take that nervousness and channel it into something the rest of us want to listen to or watch. My job, if I'm the presenter, is to harness that nervousness and let it drive the energy of my presentation without forcing me to rush so quickly that nobody pays any attention. You harness that fear. You accept that fear. You accept that you're going to be nervous and let that take you to the next level. Then have the focus to do a one-on-one conversation with people. It's so important. I hate it when somebody is on stage saying all of you, as though they're talking to all of us all at the same time. Well, they may be technically, but emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, it's just you and me. We're the only ones that count. And it's just you and me. The others are just listening in. Brian asked, Brian writes, I stayed up until 1 a.m. in Tbilisi for this. Brian, I am speechless. Nothing I do is worth staying up until 1 a.m. Please forgive my 3 yawns. They were yawns of appreciation. The conversation I did with Joel, the poet, this morning, he was in Melbourne, Australia. It was 1 o'clock in the morning as we were at a 10 o'clock conference. So the fact that he was coherent at all was an amazing thing. So, Brian, thank you for staying up. Michael writes, sometimes in a live event, it's better to be nervous after the event than during it, when all others around are losing their heads. I've found that if you're involved in the moment, the nervousness drives you to the point where things start. Then if you know your subject and you've rehearsed and you've developed your slides, so that, in other words, you've built an infrastructure that supports you, and you're not just flying by the seat of your pants, say, I've got to invent this in a minute and a half. But if you've done your preparation, the instant it starts, the nervousness disappears because you're focused in the moment. You're focused in that communication right now with you and the people in your audience. And when you do that, the fear disappears, the nervousness disappears, and the real, true, essential you comes to the fore. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for joining us. Zoe, back to you.